I'm Spiro with SP Woodart, and thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to make a 3-tiered dessert server, and it's going to be sweet. I'm going to start by selecting some walnut wood. Looks pretty good. Then I'm going to measure out the largest circle that I can obtain in the width of this board. And that will serve as my bottom tier. Then I'm going to go ahead and make 3 cross-cut pieces. Each subsequent piece will be 1 inch shorter than the previous. I'd also like to mention that I'm going to eventually make T-track hold downs for my cross-cut sled. I just haven't got around to making them yet. So for now I'm just using some spring clamps and some wood to hold down the boards. And my second cut. And my third and final cross cut, which will be the smallest top tier. Now I'll just check to make sure each piece came out to my desired width, and they did. They're all 1 inch different. Now I started thinking about just having the walnut dessert server, and I didn't like that idea, so I decided to add some hard maple stripes that I had left over from some previous cutting boards I had made, and I think this will look better. So I'll take each of these pieces of walnuts, I'll mark the centers, and then I'll make some rip cuts. I'm starting to like this classical music. Now I'll take the hard maple strips and cut those to the appropriate lengths. What's really nice about these maple strips is they're already planed and already jointed, and I had enough of them laying around so I don't have to cut any more. Now it's time to glue up all of my wood pieces. I'm going to use a wood glue. It's Titebond 2, and it is a food-safe wood glue. And just in case you can't read what it says on the video, it says that it is FDA approved for indirect food contact, that is, cutting boards. And it also states that it is water cleanup and non-toxic. I always use Titebond 2 anytime I make a project that there's a possibility it will come into contact with food. Now, I know there are many debates and statements out there stating that, once something cures, it's always food safe. But I just like to be extra careful. So I use products that actually state that it is food safe on it. Also, since I decided that these plates will be turned between centers, and I'll tell you later on in the video why, it's not necessary to surface plane at all. You only need the maple wood joints in the center to be jointed. I hope I'm not gifted any thumbs down for this, but in my opinion, when the grains aren't exactly perfect, I believe it adds an individuality and a character to the piece. Sometimes, not all the time. Now, after you clamp them and allow that glue to dry for 24 hours, I'll come back, remove the clamps, and I'm ready for the next step, which is marking the center of these now rectangular boards, and then putting a hole punch in the center, on both sides, that is, of each board, and then drawing a circle from the center out with the compass. And I'll make sure that I can get the largest possible circle that I can get and get really close to the edges on each of the boards. So I ended with an 8-inch, a 7-inch, and a 6-inch diameter. I would have preferred to have a 12, 10, and an 8-inch diameter for each of the plates, but I only have a 10-inch swing on my lathe. Now, to speed up the turning process, I'm going to round out these blanks with my jigsaw, or you can use a bandsaw, or however you'd like to cut these out. The main reason I decided to turn between centers is it was easier. I didn't have to plane the wood or anything, just stick it up there, and I didn't have to drill any hole for a woodworm screw, which the hole would have been too big for the hardware to install later. I could have used a glue block or a sacrificial block that would have worked. And in case you're wondering, I do have one of my kids' Star Wars Darth Vader band-aids on my thumb. Now I'll start truing up the outside of the platter with a carbide roughing tool. This is a tool that I had made for my own specifications, which I like, and it really did a great job, did a quick job of truing up the outside of this platter. Then I'm going to change gears and switch over to my 3/8-inch bowl gouge. I'll then clean up the surfaces of the plate on the front side and the back side, and this will leave 2 tenons, one on the front and one on the back, which I will remove later, so it's okay that they're there. Here I had to switch to a longer bowl gouge. The other one was a little too short and I couldn't reach all the way in. Now, since I have 3 plates to make and I want them all identical, I'm going to make a lot of measurement marks so I can repeat these measurements for the subsequent plates. Now, when I finished the project, the plates weren't exactly identical, but they were pretty close and I was happy with it. I ended up going with a simple, repeatable profile, more modern shapes like clean-cut lines, angles, rather than a lot of rounding and OG style profiles. And in my opinion, this complemented the maple stripe and the more modern hardware that I have for this piece. The tool that I'm using here is called a spear scraper, and I'm making pretty much from the center of the plate to the bottom of the plate, making a 45-degree angle. And to stop any food from flying off the server when it's mobile, I'm going to add a lip on the top of each of the plates. And as always, you're going to make sure that you want to have really sharp tools when turning. And here's a quick clip of me cleaning out the surface between the tenon and the face lip. Now this is where I'll start sanding the outside of the rim only, because I'm going to use my orbital sander to flatten out the inside and outside of the surface of the plate. I'm going to start with 100 and go to 220 grit. That way it matches the sandpaper that I have for my orbital sander. I will also hand sand with the grain in between each of the grits. Here is the 150 grit and my Darth Vader Band-Aid. Then some more hand sanding. Then on to a 220 grit and more hand sanding. Now I'll remove the plate and you can see the tenon on the front and on the bottom, which will now be removed with my orbital sander. And make sure you use proper safety precautions, as in a dust mask or a respirator. I started at 80 grit here to remove the tenons really fast and went up to the 220 grit. Also, I'd like to note one important step is make sure you don't sand off your center marks, at least on one side, because you need that to drill the hole for your hardware. So, before sanding the last side, I need to determine what size drill bit to use for my hardware, which was a 7/32. Now I'll finish sanding the top of the plate and go through all of the grits. I forgot to mention an important tip earlier on that you want to make sure that your plate is the proper thickness so that the hardware will fit all the way through and the screw will protrude. If it's too short, you won't be able to attach your hardware. You'll also want to make sure that all of your grain is oriented in the same direction for each of your tiers. This will have an overall more pleasing effect. In my opinion, anyway. Now that completes the process of one tier, and you'll want to go ahead and repeat that process 2 more times. I'm not going to show it because it's just a repeat of what I just did. And the only difference is the last tier, the bottom tier. I'm going to make a little ridge underneath so it sits up off of a table, which you can see right here in the clip. Now I'm going to apply a General Finishes salad bowl finish, which is a food safe finish. And I'll apply this to all 3 of the plates. You'll want to make sure that you use rubber gloves. And with this particular finish, you have to stir, not shake. And you'll want to pour some into a separate container, a sealable container. That way you don't cross-contaminate the rest of your finish in your can. Here I'm going to move over to my finishing table and just take some shop paper towels, that's the blue towels, and fold them up into little pieces and dunk the finish. Get a good amount on the rag or paper towel, and then wipe with the grain. Well, you can wipe in any direction. It's just when you do the final wipe, make sure you wipe with the grain. I will apply 3 to 5 coats with this type of finish. And the downside to this finish is that it takes about 12 hours to dry in between each coat. But when it's complete, it's an extremely durable finish, and it lasts a long time, and it's very low maintenance. You'll also want to do a quick light sand with either some steel wool or a Scotch Guard pad in between each coat. This is my first in-between coat sanding after the first 12-hour period. I really like using these Scotch sanding pads. They have the same grit as steel wool. You can get them in different grits. But what's really nice about them is that they don't leave any metal pieces or metal little clippings or shavings behind in the wood grain that steel wool sometimes does. And this is the reason why I like using them. Now I'm going to apply a beeswax mineral oil mixture called Beekeeper's Gold. I'll apply a thin, even coat all over the plates back and front, and then I'll proceed to polish them on the buffing wheel. When you're buffing, just make sure you use 2 hands and have a firm grip, because you don't want the plate to get ripped out of your hands. And I'm buffing at about 2,500 RPMs. Oh, also, this is a cotton buffing wheel. And lastly, the assembly.